Just a warning, this episode contains some graphic material that listeners may find confronting.
Wednesday, the 11th of November 2020. Remembrance Day, and it'd definitely be a day they will never forget on Wallangara Road in Dover Heights. It was a fine spring day, and Michelle Leslie, who started off as a fill-in chef before becoming Melissa Caddick's personal trainer, was set to go for a walk with Melissa that very morning.
With COVID-19 closing the borders, of course, the annual Aspen trip was off. So instead, Melissa had plans to host a lavish Christmas lunch in 6 weeks' time, and she wanted to discuss the details with Michelle.
I received a text probably 6:30 a.m. in the morning, and sorry, can't catch up today, I'll get back to you. And then, I don't know, I felt like there was something wrong, and I sent another text, are you okay? Sent an email, and then still nothing. And I said to Billy, something's going on, something's not right.
That was the last contact Michelle ever had with Melissa Caddick.
Welcome to episode 7 of Liar Liar, Melissa Caddick and the Missing Millions. I'm Tom Steinfort, a reporter with 60 Minutes.
And I'm Kate McClymont, an investigative journalist at the Sydney Morning Herald. We are delving into one of the most extraordinary crimes of the century. Melissa Caddick, a seemingly successful Sydney businesswoman, turned out to be a sociopathic con artist who stole more than $23 million from clients, mainly family and friends, who thought their funds were being invested in shares.
Within hours of her home being raided by the corporate regulator, she disappeared.
Where is she? The millionaire accused of stealing from friends to fund her lavish lifestyle.
She hasn't been in touch with her family. She hasn't been in touch with her friends.
This was a systematic and meticulous attempt to defraud investors.
4 or 5 million? About $10 million.
You name it, Chris and Dior, Chanel.
She was living off our money.
She is a survivor, and she would have had a plan.
Nothing would surprise any of us.
You know how much we love you. You just come home, everything's taken care of, you're not in trouble.
Hi, it's Melissa Caddick.
In this episode, we're going to look at the day Caddick's house of cards collapsed.
And most bizarrely, why her husband Anthony took more than 30 hours to tell the police his wife was missing.
So it was shortly after 6 a.m. that Melissa Caddick answered the door on that Wednesday morning in November to find 8 federal police along with 10 officers from the corporate watchdog, the Australian Securities and Investments Commission.
Tom, it's hard to imagine just how stunned and then panicked she must have felt as she was handed the warrant to search her Dover Heights home and also the safety deposit box she had at a bank in the city.
Yeah, and on top of that, she was presented with orders freezing all of her beloved credit cards and her bank accounts as well.
And not only was she forbidden from disposing of any of her properties or assets, perhaps more worrying for her was that the corporate regulator was demanding to know exactly what she'd done with all those millions she had received.
So in terms of how something like this plays out, in order to get search warrants, you've got to convince a magistrate that you have reasonable grounds to suspect that a crime has been committed.
Look, that's right, and you can't get a warrant unless you've done an investigation. And as we mentioned in the last episode, in June, ASIC had been tipped off that Melissa had been illegally using her friend Rachel's financial services licence.
Yeah, and ASIC soon realised it was much, much bigger than that. This is how ASIC explained it to us. We've used an actor to convey their responses to our queries.
After ASIC spoke to a select number of witnesses, including some who had invested funds with Caddick, new concerning information came to light. This informed the decision to undertake more investigation with a team which included lawyers, investigators and forensic accountants.
It became apparent pretty quickly that this case had all the potential hallmarks of a massive fraud. But investigators had to tread really, really carefully so that they didn't tip Melissa off.
ASIC was able to obtain the cooperation, assistance and evidence from a small number of clients of Caddick who were prepared to keep our investigation confidential. It is critical that the existence of an investigation remains covert before any search warrant is issued. Without that, steps could have been taken by Caddick to remove or transfer assets and conceal or destroy evidence.
The team of investigators had found that Melissa Caddick's clients' ComSec accounts were straight-out forgeries, and instead of establishing share portfolios, investors' funds were going straight into the coffers of the con artist herself. Now, as the investigation progressed, the team at ASIC became increasingly concerned. Millions of dollars had already been plundered by Melissa Caddick, and if they didn't act soon, the new investors she was circling might lose their life savings as well.
Yeah, and this is really unfortunate because for one investor, that raid actually came too late. She handed over hundreds of thousands of dollars just 3 weeks before Melissa's demise. But for another, it was actually a bit of a lucky reprieve because we've been told that Caddick's emails show that at that very time, she was trying to get her claws into one of her style idols, famous Australian fashion designer Colette Dinnigan.
So, here is how it all played out. And critically, Melissa was blissfully unaware of her imminent downfall. Now, what she didn't know was that on the Monday, ASIC obtained search warrants. On the Tuesday, they went to the federal court for an urgent hearing to get the freezing orders and the travel restrictions. Now, this was all done in great secrecy because ASIC was fearful that if Melissa cottoned on to the impending raid, she could destroy evidence, dispose of assets, or, even more worryingly, flee the country.
The corporate regulator was locked and loaded, ready to pull the trigger. And so, as dawn was breaking on Wednesday morning, the 11th of November in 2020, the normally quiet Walangara Road was buzzing with a phalanx of officers outside Melissa's mansion.
And rather than a big burly cop bashing down the door, the investigator who would prove to be Caddick's nemesis was a savvy young woman, Isabella Allen, only in her late 20s, who found herself appointed the lead investigator of this extraordinary matter.
Yeah, and Allen could never have foreseen just how this case would come to really grip the nation, or that it would set her on a collision course with Caddick's husband, Anthony Koletti. Now, that situation would climax in the police applying for an apprehended violence order on her behalf, and we're going to come to that in a later episode.
When Isabella Allen finally confronted the woman she had spent so many months secretly building a case against, court documents indicate Melissa was absolutely aghast, wanting to know, "When do I have to appear in court?" Allen told her it was in 2 days' time, Friday the 13th of November 2020 at 9:45am. And now, Tom, get a load of what she says next. "Does this mean I can't use my credit cards? All my day-to-day transactions are purchased on credit cards." Caddick also complained about being required to prepare a statement of her assets and liabilities. "Well, how am I supposed to do that when you have taken my computers?" When Isabella Allen suggested she speak to a lawyer, Melissa simply replied she didn't have one. That day would have been the fraudster's worst nightmare. All these uninvited law enforcement types marching around her house.
Yeah, our investigation for 60 Minutes was actually given the first snippet of vision from the raid, which was taken by investigators. And it shows Melissa standing there in her home office. And to be honest, she just looks shell-shocked. She's there in her black gym gear. Clearly she was getting ready for the walk when the knock came on the door. Her hair's up in a ponytail. And I really think for the first time, it's just when we see Melissa, I don't know, as herself really. No makeup, no bling, no designer labels, just there in exercise clothes as her world crumbles around her.
And I think you're right, because her body language says it all. You can see her there, her arms are crossed. She looks tense, and it's clear from the vision that she knew this was bad, like really bad.
Yeah, and eerily, I guess, when you look at it now, that footage we know is the last vision ever of Melissa Caddick.
ASIC told us that the day went pretty smoothly and without incident, but this is certainly not the view of her husband Anthony Koletti. In his later paid interview with Channel 7 Spotlight, he alleged that the raiding party arrived at 5 a.m. and tortured his wife for 14 hours.
The way that they interrogated her was inhumane. She wasn't given food, she wasn't given water, she wasn't given medical attention, which she desperately needed. She just didn't know herself. Like, I've never seen her in that state.
Okay, some pretty wild allegations there. I mean, let's clear one thing up for starters. The raid didn't start at 5 a.m, as he claimed, but occurred 1.5 hours later.
Police bosses, Tom, are very conscious of overtime bills, and those 5 a.m. starts are reserved for premises where the door has to be battered down because the occupants may or may not have weapons.
Yeah, so we asked ASIC about Koletti's claims that Melissa was apparently interrogated for hours and that she wasn't given food or water. This is what they had to say.
Caddick was able to contact a lawyer if she wished. Caddick was not under arrest, and no formal interview was held with Caddick. Caddick assisted the AFP and ASIC staff during the search. Caddick was given access to food and water. She could freely move around her home in the company of an allocated AFP officer. She could also leave the premises if she wished.
Still, it must have been absolutely shattering for Melissa standing there and watching as the police seized her jewellery, her designer rags, her shoes, computers, files, everything, and just taking it all away. In that interview a year later, Anthony complained that they even seized that Gucci gown that she wore for their own nuptials.
They took a wedding dress. It was paraded in front of her like it was some kind of trophy. ASIC took all the files, all the receipts, everything like that. So really, I just feel like she had no foot to stand on.
I'm just going to let that rather bizarre comment go through to the keeper, and you'll get a better idea of why that's bizarre in the next episode, when the story takes a dramatic twist.
All right, don't give too much away for now, Kate. Back to the raid. ASIC explained that it has very strict oversight measures during the search and seizure process.
A total of 89 bags and boxes of evidence were seized from the search. At the conclusion of the search, and as per protocol, the AFP property officer then explained to Caddick what each of the items of evidence seized was, and where they had been found. Caddick acknowledged this by signing a copy of the property seizure records. The seized items were then transported to the ASIC Sydney office.
We have obtained the list of the items that they seized that day, and this included an absolutely jaw-dropping amount of jewellery. There's Cartier necklaces, Canturi bracelets, earrings, cufflinks, along with the designer handbags, wallets, shoes, and armfuls of designer clothes, including a whole pile of Colette Dinnigan dresses.
One thing that jumps out at me, Kate, I just can't get over how many watches were seized. Breitling, Christian Dior, of course, Cartier, Louis Vuitton, Tag Heuer, Longines. I'm sure they were never late for a function. Punctuality would have been top of the pile with that many timepieces going around. And I'm pleased to see, Kate, that the liquid hand soap from Christian Dior didn't escape confiscation either. Who knew Christian Dior even did hand soap?
I didn't know that either, Tom. One thing I was really curious to see was that they seized a key to safety deposit box 4778 at a bank in the city. Now, inside they found 2 hard drives and an Apple Mac Mini.
And I think pretty interestingly here, there were also 2 envelopes there containing foreign currency.
Back to Dover Heights. There were heaps of files and computer equipment seized. And one of the items seized was a silver Apple Mac computer. But the thing I love about this was the post-it note which was attached. It read, "It's going to be a good day."
Oh boy, but this particular Wednesday was the very worst imaginable for Melissa Caddick. This is how her husband Anthony later reflected upon how his wife felt at the end of that day.
She was numb. It was like she had no life left in her whatsoever. The way that they interrogated her was inhumane.
The last of the police raiding party left her house around 6:30 p.m, and at 6:49 p.m, her friend Kate Horn sent a text message to Melissa.
So we were in the process of arranging a lunch for the following month at her house, actually, with our two mothers and Melissa. And I had spoken to my mum that day. She was available, so I messaged Melissa at home and said, Mum and I are good for lunch next month.
Phone records show that it took Melissa half an hour to reply, but at 7:18 p.m, she did get back to Kate, simply replying, "Great," with an X for a kiss.
But retrospectively, she's just handling all of this while ASIC are raiding her house as if you'd have no clue that this was going on behind the scenes.
Detective Inspector Gretchen Atkins, who was in charge of the investigation into Melissa's disappearance, said that Caddick's phone and her computer had given them some indication of what she had done that night after police left the premises.
She did some internet search, looked for somewhere to go for dinner, and was looking for a lawyer to assist her with the ASIC investigation, and that's about it.
A year later, Koletti was to tell Channel 7 that he and Melissa didn't exchange a word about what happened that day, and that he was up until the wee hours of the morning writing his music.
I couldn't ask her a thing. She was just absolutely shell-shocked. She went straight to sleep. I was up for, I went to sleep at 4 a.m. I held her. I just felt that I had to console her. So we just cuddled and spooned as usual.
But the morning after the raid, Koletti would wake up alone. So at 7:16 a.m, he sent his wife Melissa a text message simply saying,
"You okay? Have you got your key?"
Now, Anthony doesn't get a reply to that message, and he soon realises that Melissa's phone is actually still at home on the charger, and her keys and her wallet are all where she left them as well. And this is really out of character for Melissa, because Anthony tells investigators she'd always take her phone with her whenever she went out for a run in the morning.
Okay, so what Anthony does, or in fact what he doesn't do now, has added a whole new level of intrigue to the disappearance of his wife.
Yeah, we know that the last people to see Melissa, apart from her son and her husband, are the police. Now, they've left at around 6:30ish on the Wednesday evening. But it's not until Friday that anyone learns that Melissa has vanished.
Melissa had been ordered by Justice Jane Jago to appear in court at 9:45 on Friday morning, which, due to the pandemic, was to be via a Microsoft Teams link, meaning she didn't have to attend in person, just via an audio-visual link on her computer.
According to ASIC, this is how it all unfolded.
Caddick was sent an email on Thursday 12th of November 2020, providing her the details of the AVL for the hearing the next day. She was emailed again, twice on the morning of the hearing.
But Melissa never replied to any of those emails, and it does appear that there started to be a bit of concern about this silence, and it certainly comes through in Isabella Allen, the investigator's third email, which said,
"Good morning, Melissa. In the event you didn't receive my email yesterday evening, I want to confirm with you that the court hearing this morning will be occurring electronically."
Again, there was no response. When 9:45 rolled around that Friday morning, something remarkable occurred. We have actors recounting the bizarre scene that played out in Justice Jago's court, where Melissa Caddick is the first defendant and her company Malava is the second defendant. Here's the judge.
Australian Securities and Investment Commission and Melissa Louise Caddick and Malava Proprietary Limited. Can I take appearances?
ASIC's barrister Stephanie Fendekian replied,
"Yes, Your Honour, Miss Fendekian for the plaintiff."
Yes, thank you, Miss Fendekian. Is there any appearance for the respondents? No?
My instructing solicitor tells me that the defendants might be represented on teams. There's an AK.
At this point, Anthony Koletti pipes up.
Yes, I'm AK.
Are you in some way, you're not one of the defendants? Are you representing the defendants?
Melissa Caddick is my wife, is that...
Before Anthony could even finish, Justice Jago snapped.
Well, no, you can't. She's either here or she's not.
Now, what Anthony Koletti said next is pretty remarkable.
Is she not there?
I can't see her in the list of participants. Is the actual first defendant here on the line with you?
Who's the first defendant?
That is Melissa Caddick.
No, she's not, Your Honour.
Is she your wife, did you say?
Yes, that's correct.
But she's not there. OK. Well, you can't actually appear for her.
Right. So what would you like me to do? Is there anything I can help you with?
No, there's not. But you can hear what I propose to do.
After discussion with ASIC's barrister, the judge announced she was adjourning the proceedings for a fortnight until the 27th of November. Anthony Koletti interjected again.
Your Honour, if I may add something.
Yes.
Am I to believe that both defendants aren't there?
The judge said that she couldn't see anyone on the call who was representing either of the defendants, prompting Koletti to respond.
Okay, well, Your Honour, as Melissa's husband, if you need me to help you with anything or you need to talk to me, I'm more than happy to help.
I understand and thank you, but the position is, as you're not the first defendant and you're not the solicitor for the first defendant or otherwise a legal representative for the first defendant, OK, so now I will adjourn. Thank you.
The judge suggested to Koletti that he inform his wife of the orders she'd just made, and then, after only 6 minutes, the hearing was over.
It's quite clear that Koletti was expecting his wife to turn up at that online hearing.
Yeah, I mean, he actually says, my wife is Melissa Caddick. Is she not there?
I mean, Tom, where did he think she was? She had vanished into thin air the day before without taking her phone, her wallet, her car keys, let alone a computer.
Yeah, I mean, this is the worst day of her life. Her house has been raided. Her precious goods have all been taken away.
And she's got no access to money as all her accounts have been frozen. So she can't leave the country. And, Tom, you know, she must have known she was facing arrest sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and yet when Anthony Koletti realises his wife has disappeared, he doesn't ring anyone. And he certainly doesn't try and get in touch with any of Melissa's family or her friends to ask, hey, is Melissa with you?
And crucially, he hasn't told the police. So here he is on Friday morning looking for his missing wife to appear on an online court hearing. And Tom, he doesn't mention at any stage while he's on the online court hearing that she's actually missing.
So 10 minutes after court finishes, and it does dawn on Anthony that Melissa isn't online, he decides to ring Amelia Griffin. Now, she is one of the federal police officers who had been at the raid at their Dover Heights home. She urged Anthony to report his wife's disappearance at long last. About half an hour later, he also decides then to ring Isabella Allen and asks her what he should do. She told Koletti that he's got to immediately lodge a missing persons report with local police.
And after another 2-hour delay, Koletti finally informs Bondi Police that his wife is missing. It's now almost noon on Friday the 13th. I mean, this is 30 hours and possibly more since his wife disappeared.
Yeah, look, we'd flagged that Anthony became the subject of a lot of interest around this time in the case. That 30-hour delay, it just became the subject of such intense public speculation, Kate.
Oh, look, exactly. You know, was he buying his wife time to flee the country, helping her escape, just giving her a change of appearance, a head start?
All right, well, let's delve into those questions right now. What we do know is that Koletti told the police that at 5:30am the morning after the raid, his stepson, who was in the upstairs gym at their Dover Heights property, he said he heard the front door close and just presumed it was his mum going for a run. But Melissa's friend Alice is one of a number of people to raise a bit of an eyebrow about this.
So this is where I think a bit funny. So when she disappeared, it was said that her son heard the front door close and he was in the gym. Now, to hear the front door close, you have to go up one set of stairs, a second set of stairs, and you were on the living kitchen area. Then you go up another 2 steps, 2 lots of stairs, before you get to the gym area. I don't think you would hear the front door close if you were that far up.
So Melissa has left without her phone, without her keys, and her car is still there. You would think her husband would be completely beside himself.
Well, Anthony told police that he just assumed that his wife had got up early that morning to go and see some lawyers.
But when she doesn't come home that night, he still doesn't do anything.
Well, sort of. No, Anthony didn't report Melissa missing to police, but he later revealed that evening he actually drove around their neighbourhood looking for some sort of sign, perhaps a message written somewhere saying, and I quote, "AK, I'm okay." He also had the windows down on his car and was blaring his unique music out the speakers.
We don't know a lot of people that live around here, so I just thought maybe she'd be walking around aimlessly. I had the music up full blast with music that I'd made for Melissa, basically, so if she heard it, yeah, she'd be like, okay, there he is.
So, with Melissa missing, it's now the behaviour of her husband Anthony that really becomes the main point of interest for people. Tom, you mentioned Anthony's unique music.
Yeah, look, one of Anthony's passions is music, and he's got these aspirations to be a big-time DJ and an international performer. And after his wife's disappearance, Anthony took solace, I guess you'd say, in expressing his true feelings via his music, and more particularly, the lyrics. There are some pretty brutal reflections of what he alleges happened at the raid, and, well, it's kind of landed him in hot water now. In fact, court proceedings, which we'll come to in a later episode.
Tom, I'm not exactly sure how to adequately describe Anthony's electro endeavours, in which he recounts his version of that extraordinary day. Now, the album is called The Raid, and it kicks off with a track called Introduction.
November 11, 2020, 5 a.m. This is a true account of what happened on the day of the raid. Parental guidance is recommended.
All right, so that's followed by some knocking sounds, which I guess represents police arriving at the property. And then in the next track, Good Morning, that kicks off with some interesting sound effects of Koletti snoring. And then his impersonation of a female police officer saying, among other things, no, we don't have any proof or evidence, we'll just get them.
I'll go around the front. Me. No, we don't have any proof or any evidence. No, we'll just get them, yeah. Don't worry about them, I'm going on holiday soon.
Freeze, don't move.
And Tom, I think this rhyming one is pretty special.
You don't need to be here, Mr. Koletti. Just leave and we'll turn your wife's head into spaghetti.
His interview on Channel 7's Spotlight program was also peppered with tracks from the album. And Tom, I was looking at Twitter as I watched Koletti's interview when it aired in October 2021. The verdict of the Twitterati was not kind.
Is it just me, or is Anthony Koletti trying to parlay his wife's disappearance into a music career? #7 News.
But I think my favourite of the collection is this bit from Bragging.
You allowed a greedy girl from a large corporation to interrogate our family for 14 hours, and you just stood around and drank and broke our zip tap.
So, Tom, of all the dastardly things he is accusing ASIC of, and these include torture and starvation, one of the most heinous crimes, according to Anthony, is breaking their water filter, their zip tap.
Yeah. All right. Well, look, now that we've given listeners a bit of a sense of Anthony's music, we'll get back to this image of him driving around the quiet, prim and proper streets of Dover Heights in the hotted-up blue Audi and the doof-doof blaring. His hope was to lure a middle-aged woman out of hiding. It seems like some sort of local Pied Piper.
You know what, Tom? It's a pity the locals didn't call the police when they heard that racket coming from AK's Audi that night, because the search could have started much earlier.
All right, well, let's get back to the day that Anthony reported Melissa missing, or more specifically 3 hours after that, 3:13 p.m. on the Friday, and Melissa's friend Alice leaves a voicemail for Melissa asking about their dinner plans for that evening.
I then received a phone call from the police asking me did I know where she was.
Understandably, Alice was pretty troubled by this call out of nowhere from the police.
Well, very concerned. Because, again, playing back a lot of the conversations over the years of what Melissa had told me about, abusive relationships and all, I wondered who or what had happened to her. And I really did at that stage think somebody had hurt her. And so I then phoned Adam to ask him, why did I receive a phone call from the police?
Melissa's brother Adam told Alice that ASIC had been to his sister's house on Wednesday. Now, at this point, he is clearly in the dark about what is really going on.
He told me was that ASIC had raided Melissa's house because of a disgruntled ex-client in WA.
I think there's a really important point to make here, Kate. At this point in time, all of these people, they're very concerned about Melissa, the missing person. There's no real, I guess, worry or awareness that there was something much more sinister at play here. What none of them knew that afternoon was that this wasn't just a case of one disgruntled victim. Melissa had stolen tens of millions from those closest to her, including both of them, Adam and Alice.
He just said, well, something's happened. ASIC raided her house and she disappeared, but he only just found out that day that she had disappeared the day before. She had gone missing on the Thursday morning because her husband, the F-wit, had not bothered to tell anyone that she had gone missing.
So what exactly did Adam say?
Well, he told me that, Anthony, the fuckwit, had not told anyone that she had been missing for more than 24 hours.
And did that shock you?
Well, it shocked me. Yes, it shocked me that, A, she was missing and that she had been gone for such a long time, and it was only then, nearly 2 days later, or a day and a half later, that the police were investigating her whereabouts.
It seems pretty extraordinary that Anthony didn't even ring Melissa's parents or her brother, who she was so close to, or any of their friends to see if Melissa was, staying with them or had even just given them a call. Anthony's actions on the day and also in the months afterwards are often, I got to be honest, pretty confusing and at times quite controversial. And we are going to discuss him in a lot more depth in a coming episode. But for now, let's return to those days after the raid.
Melissa's employee, Nicole, missed a call from the police that Friday night, asking if she knew anything about Melissa's whereabouts.
Her husband, Matthew, told us it was kind of strange that Koletti hadn't rung Nicole on the Thursday or the Friday to say that he was worried about Melissa and maybe to ask if they'd heard from her.
But no, we had to find out from the police on Saturday morning, more than 48 hours after she'd gone missing. If he was a concerned husband, why wouldn't he have rung my wife?
When Matthew and Nicole spoke to police on the Saturday, they were asked if Melissa had any identifiable features, and Nicole told them that Melissa did have tattoos of some mysterious Asian symbols on 3 of her toes, but Nicole couldn't remember exactly which foot it was on.
And Tom, we've since learned that those tattoos she had on her toes were Chinese symbols, and they were of dog, pig, dog, being the animals in the Chinese zodiac year. Now, her husband and son were the year of the dog, while Melissa was the pig.
Yes, and Kate, interesting to note that the year Melissa disappeared in the Chinese calendar, that is the year of the rat.
Stop it.
And in Chinese culture, that is seen as the animal that represents wealth and a surplus. Honestly, you can't make this stuff up.
You cannot make that up.
On the Sunday after Melissa went missing, one of her Perth investors was rudely awoken at the crack of dawn by none other than Anthony Koletti on the phone. He wanted to know if this investor had seen Melissa, as the investor was to later tell authorities.
I get this call in on Sunday morning. It's about 6 a.m. Koletti asked me, "Do you know what happened to her?" And I'm thinking, how the fuck would I know what happened to her? I thought it was so strange I rang Crime Stoppers to report the call.
After Anthony finally notified New South Wales Police about his missing wife, they swung into action. Clearly, there were some really suspicious circumstances about Caddick's disappearance, and they issued the following description.
This is an appeal for Melissa Caddick. Melissa was last seen on Thursday just after midnight at her home. She hasn't been seen since. She's 49 years old, it's about 165 centimetres tall, was last seen wearing her active running wear.
Now, in that initial report, police also stated Melissa was wearing a black singlet top and leggings and silver Nike sneakers. Unbeknown to police at that point, the brand of sneakers Melissa was wearing that day would later become central to this investigation.
There's also a fair bit of rivalry between the federal police, they were the people who'd raided Melissa's house along with ASIC, and the state police who had to handle the missing persons investigation. Now, the first thing that the New South Wales Police did was to complain that the CCTV system at the Caddick house had been disabled, as the hard drive from the CCTV camera had been confiscated by the federal police during the raid. Now, of course, this meant there was no recording.
Yeah, and given where the security cameras are on the Dover Heights mansion, I mean, there is no way that they would have missed Melissa leaving that property. They face straight out onto the front drive. But because the hard drive was gone, there was simply no recording. And that meant that there was just no way of narrowing down what time Melissa left the house and, crucially, which way she went, whether she went there on foot, whether she jumped in a car, whatever it may have been. So police searched the house, they searched the neighbourhood, they checked the CCTV footage from other houses in that area in desperation as well, but nothing came up.
They were absolutely baffled. Melissa Caddick had vanished without a trace. Meanwhile, it took an entire week before Melissa's extended family even found out that she was missing.
Yeah, so on November 19, her mother, Barb Grimley, texted relatives to say that Melissa was missing and that they believed she had been abducted. One message from Barb read, "We're all exhausted and all we want is our dear, kind-hearted daughter back."
Yeah, so the extended family, they believed that something had gone horribly wrong, and their understanding was that poor Melissa had been kidnapped after inadvertently getting in way too deep with some corrupt investors. This is what one relative told us.
Very early on, when the family thought Melissa had been abducted, it was suggested to detectives they look into what she was doing in the UK. She was involved in some unspecified jewellery business, trips to New York and Las Vegas. Could there be criminal elements involved?
And it wasn't just Melissa's family who were in the dark. You'll recall that on the morning her house was raided, Melissa sent her friend and personal trainer Michelle a text cancelling their planned morning walk. Michelle told her husband, Billy, that she sensed something here was wrong, but it wasn't until days later that they learned via the media that Melissa was missing.
We hear about it in the paper 6 days later that she's been missing.
And I woke Michelle up in her room to tell her, and then said, and she goes, oh, no. It was like missing 6 days, sinister sort of implications, and I think you grieved for her.
Yeah, I did.
What I think is amazing here is that Michelle is effectively fearing the worst, and at that point, almost mourning, what could be the death of her great friend Melissa. And she's completely unaware that in reality, Melissa has rorted Michelle and Billy out of their life savings.
And we will examine the moments when her victims discovered the sickening truth that Melissa had robbed them all blind, and that will come in a later episode. But back to Friday the 20th of November, which was now 8 days since Melissa was last seen. Her brother Adam and her husband Anthony, flanked by Detective Inspector Gretchen Atkins, they held a press conference outside Bondi Police Station, announcing that Melissa's disappearance was being treated as suspicious because there was no trace of her.
We don't have any locations that we know that she's been. She hasn't attended appointments that she had, which is why we're really concerned. She doesn't have her phone. She doesn't have any access to bank accounts.
In urging his sister to come home, Adam Grimley could barely get his words out.
She's a loving person, lovely mother. She's a great sister to me.
Anthony, reading from his mobile phone, sounded pretty flat.
Melissa is a dedicated and incredible mother, a beautiful daughter, sister and loved wife. We are asking the community to help bring Melissa home. That is all.
But some people were a bit surprised about Anthony's unusual responses to certain questions. Asked about the last conversation he had with Melissa, he said,
the night before we went to bed, so...
When you talked to her, was it
as normal?
Of course, nothing was normal. Koletti is one of the few people who at that time knew that her house had just been raided by the federal police and her accounts have been frozen. Now, quizzed about whether he could shed more light on those last moments with his wife, he replied,
there's nothing else that I can give you further.
Anthony, if she's listening
yes.
and watches this, what would you want to say to her?
You know how much we love you. Just come home. Everything's taken care of. You're not in trouble.
Like plenty of others, Melissa's relatives and friends were astounded by what they heard that day. Here's what one of the relatives told us.
The extended family, we're all speaking to each other, and it's just didn't make any sense. I mean, Adam looked absolutely distraught, and Anthony was just odd. He didn't seem to show a lot of emotion.
The relative also told us they were totally confused when Anthony said Melissa had nothing to worry about and that everything is okay, you're not in trouble, because by now they knew she was in trouble, a big-time trouble.
At the time, Kate, Inspector Gretchen Atkins said that both Melissa's son and Anthony were cooperative, but rather reserved, I guess you might put it, in the days after Melissa disappeared. This is what she had to say about Anthony Koletti.
Yeah, he is probably slightly more restrained than that, especially with contacting us. We'll contact him and he'll always take our calls, ask questions, but he isn't always ringing us, which is different to what we would normally see, and it gives us a chance to focus on our investigation, which is great, but it's a little bit different to what we would normally expect.
Yeah, so what normally happens, according to investigators, is that the family of a missing person is calling them day or night, asking, have you got any new leads? Have you heard anything? Has anyone called up with information? And also offering their own advice on perhaps this might be a good lead, or have you checked that certain piece of information? But that's just not what happened this time around.
And look, we know that everyone behaves differently, and you can't assume that just because someone isn't on the phone to the police night and day doesn't mean that they don't care.
Or that they have something to hide.
I mean, that's right. It's just that it's unusual. It was Adam's 54th birthday on the 1st of December 2020, and no one was in much of a mood for celebrating, as it was now almost 3 weeks since Melissa had disappeared.
Yeah, things were pretty grim, but Adam and Melissa's loyal friend Alice insisted that they had to do something to mark the birthday.
I knew it was Adam's birthday and his parents were absolutely devastated. And I told his mother, I said, we still need to recognise Adam's birthday. I said, I'll cook and I will bring it over. And that was the deal, and she agreed. And I did, and earlier that day when I phoned Adam, just confirmed I'm coming over, and he then told me Melissa's husband and son were also going to be at dinner. I said, that's fine, there's lots of food. And I think what I found most astounding was the behaviour of Anthony Koletti. It was like it was just another day, another dinner. And when I saw Melissa's parents, they were devastated. When I saw Adam, he was devastated. And I found that really strange.
Meanwhile, the months ticked by, and there were apparent sightings of Melissa all over the country. She was on a houseboat in the Hawkesbury, a caravan in the Snowy Mountains. She chartered a jet from Bankstown Airport and, some say, fled the country.
It's so hard to get your head around what a huge story this had become.
Yeah, and speculation, well, it just hit fever pitch when Melissa Caddick's Queensland solicitor filed an affidavit in court which read,
Since about November 25, 2020, the homicide arm of the New South Wales Police has been investigating the possibility that her disappearance is due to her homicide.
One media outlet reported this bombshell.
I think it's more possible and probable that she ended her life at the hands of someone else. She was either killed by people who knew her, or somebody was standing over her to get the money and so on.
Police moved pretty quickly to hose that one down, claiming that Melissa's disappearance was still being treated as a missing persons case. But it made no difference. The genie now was well and truly out of the bottle.
And Tom, it seemed like everyone you spoke to had a theory about Melissa. She'd been kidnapped. She was being held against her will. She was living the high life in South America, having fled with all the money. And emails were coming in from all around the world. And look, here's just one that I received at the time.
I reckon Melissa Louise Caddick is or was holed up in either Vaucluse or Watson's Bay and will sail into the sunset out the Heads, if she hasn't already, to a country without extradition treaty. And Anthony knows, allegedly, where she is. Pacific Islands, Greece, Italy? Did anybody check to see if her suitcases or bags had gone missing? Favourite jewellery, photos, lipstick, undies, seasick tablets?
In the weeks after Melissa vanished, investors turned victims, Cheryl and Faye, seemed to kind of sum up what so many people were thinking.
I think there would have been a drawer full of passports, cut your hair, dye your hair, and bear in mind, Anthony was a hairdresser. You can get colours to put in your eyes, lenses, and masks now, it's COVID. She could be anywhere.
Yeah, somebody's helped her.
Melissa's family members, particularly her husband, became almost collateral damage in all of this and very much the wrongful targets of some quite lurid speculation. There were suggestions that Anthony was covering up Melissa's death, or worse yet, that he had killed her. Now this, we've got to stress, was total nonsense. But of course, with the internet the way it is, it spread like wildfire. Let's hear from Anthony again.
If I had have known where she was, I would have told the police, because she means more to me than her being in jail. Her to be alive, I could see her behind bars before I could see her dead. No one vanishes. I don't think it was an accident at all. Someone got greedy and wanted her dead.
The crazy speculation didn't stop with Anthony. His father, Rhodo Koletti, was so angry about the gossip and innuendo about himself, he threatened to sue a Facebook group of amateur sleuths.
I think the whole Melissa Caddick thing has taken on a life of its own. I was guilty by association. I am Anthony's father. I had been accused of just about everything from plotting all of the schemes that Melissa was using, to masterminding them, to even killing Melissa.
So, Kate, if you and I are getting all of these wild theories sent to us, imagine what the police were having to deal with.
We've had lots of information, lots of stuff's come from Crime Stoppers, and everything has been chased down. None of it has actually been to say that that's Melissa, and it's all over the country. All over the country, we've had people call in.
Where are we talking?
Victoria, all through New South Wales, all around Sydney, Queensland, Northern Territory, pretty much the country had Crime Stoppers reports to say that I think we've seen Melissa here, there, and every single one of them we've sent police from those areas to go and follow up. Unfortunately, nothing's been confirmed to say that that was Melissa in those areas.
Even the then New South Wales Police Commissioner Mick Fuller weighed into the story. Here's his interview with Ben Fordham on Radio 2GB.
Melissa Caddick, she has now been missing the Sydney mum for 14 weeks. Is it possible that she's acting on her own, or is that not the assumption that you're working on?
Well, all lines of inquiry are open, Ben. Obviously, last time since you and I spoke, there's been enormous interest in the media and the public, and that's a good thing because if she is alive and if she is still in Australia, that every day we continue to talk about her, we're one day closer to finding her.
And if she's alive and she's out there, she could have changed her appearance drastically?
Absolutely, Ben, and I think the message is at some stage she will realise that she's going to have to turn herself in and face these allegations, and I think the sooner she does that, if she is alive, then the better.
This interview took place on the 15th of February 2021. Now, only 6 days later, on a secluded beach far from Sydney, this case would be turned on its head.
And in the next episode, we'll look at that momentous discovery on a faraway beach, as well as the heartbreaking moment for family and friends when they finally realised Melissa Caddick had robbed them blind.
There's no account. There's no money. Melissa isn't just missing.
Now we know that the ocean is a swirling body of eddies and currents that rotate in different directions.
I've personally been off the heads and actually been in the water.
Con artist of the century.
If you have found any of the content of today's episode troubling, please contact Lifeline on 13 11 14.
Liar Liar is a co-production of the Sydney Morning Herald and 60 Minutes.
It was written and presented by Kate McClymont and Tom Steinfort.
Michael Evans is the Sydney Morning Herald's investigations editor and the series' supervising producer.
This episode was produced and edited by David McMillan with Tracy Hannaford for 60 Minutes.
Kirsty Thompson is the executive producer of 60 Minutes.
For more of Australia's best investigative journalism, subscribe to the Sydney Morning Herald by visiting smh.com.au and watch 60 Minutes on 9 or 9 Now every Sunday.
If you know more about Melissa Caddick's disappearance, please contact the team by emailing liarliarpodcast@smh.com.au.
A portion of Anthony Koletti's audio in this episode is from Spotlight, The Vanishing, and is used courtesy of the 7 Network.
Some names and voices have been changed in this series to protect the identity of victims.